The next tab, the geometry tab, is very important. From here we'll start with the uh, definition of our lines, points, and all the geometry that will we used in our next step later will be the mesh. So it's important to create a good and correct geometry to avoid later meshing problems or not so accurate results after solving. So you have a complete range of tools to create the geometry. We can start always from points, from bottom geometry, bottom or lower entities, which are points, and then get a line and then a surface. But we can as well create higher geometric entities, which by it will by defining for instance a volume, uh, it will contain automatically surfaces, lines, and points. So to create our geometry, for example, if we want to define a point, there's always a name. You can edit the name always. We can if we define a point, we can enter the coordinates using any units system, which the one by default is the international system, but we can always, as I told you in the beginning, that we can always mix the line and everything can be created entering the points. Another way to define the geometry is by using the grid. This is the HUD toolbar. Okay, it's very useful for to switch views from geometry and mesh and other utilities. One utility is the grid. If we see here the grid, this grid will help us to sometimes to measure some distances and to create the geometry. By default, the center is located here at the zero position according to the global Cartesian, and the normal is the normal is the z axis, and the spacing is 1 meter. But we can and the size is 100 meters. We can always play with different coordinate systems. For example, if I want to set a grid with a spacing of uh, 0.25 or 25 centimeters in both axes, here we have it. Each square will be of 0.25 by 0.25 meters. So if we want to create some points, okay, it can be created just by clicking in the intersection of each square of the grid. Okay, or 0 0, it's here. Then we can create different points. Okay, one point here. We can to create different entities. Once we in this case we just create the 1 point with these coordinates. If we want to just to finish the point definition, this point 1, we can click here or press caps plus enter key of the keyboard. Or if we want to repeat the process, OK and new, we can click here and other, or as well click Control plus Enter keys from your keyboard. Okay, so in this case we want to define the different points. So if I click here, my second point will be, for example, here. Or if I press Control at the same time, by clicking here, it will, well, point 3. If I want to end here, if I can press caps at the same time, clicking my last point, and caps plus Enter, I have 3 points defined. I will put point 2 here. I have 3 points. If I select all of them, I have a new contextual menu. I can see its name just by clicking here. Okay. The same way I can define lines. For example, if I want to define lines, one line coming line 1. Okay, from just I click here, my first point, and my second point here. So I have defined my line 1. If I want to create another line 2, from this point to the last one, if I press caps, it will have here my line. So if I have 2 lines and 3 points, and I used the grid to create my geometry. So well, I can create for example, down here I can create another geometry, for example a polyline by points. I can create, for example, here my first point. If I click Control, so I press Control button at the same time, I will add more points to my polyline. This will be my second point. For example, I can set here my third point, and then another one here, here, with my Control button pressed, or I can do it just by well, adding more points to my geometry. But yeah, if I just press Control button at the same time, we have this, and my last point will be the same as the starting one. If I press now caps key, I have it here. I have defined a polyline here. I can set a name. Polyline. Then another geometry that can be defined can be well, quadrilaterals or any other surface. Okay, just by clicking here, I have my surface. I used the grid to define the surface. If I want to delete it, as you remember, I can use this delete button, or I can use the, as I showed you before, keyboard shortcut, which was the I had defined to delete here the delete button. So if I click delete from the keyboard, it's already deleted. I can create a polyline using this closed polyline. So just by clicking here, I can, the name will be surface, and I click here. You can see here it will give you some tips. Pick up the entity. If we have more than one entity to be selected, we can press control, okay, but in this case it's just one entity, so we just click this polyline. We check here on the boundary that it's selected. So we have now a surface. If we want to well, change some entities, we can do it here manually, okay, as you can see, just by clicking. Or if we click here, we can edit, not just by entering the coordinate, we can do it just by picking on. We can, well, click wherever we want it, okay. So as I told you before, we can always we were working with international system units, but we can always switch to different units. So in this case we wanted to see the conversion. We can leave it like this in inches, okay, and it can be there. We can leave it that with the units mixed. The same for any other entity. Here we have it in meters, but well, here if you want to see some if we want to use coordinates with different units, we can do it as well. So if I turn off the grid, now I can, well, some other important utility is how to work with the control, with the mouse controls. With the scroll, you can zoom in on and zoom out, okay. With the if we click, if we leave the scroll button, the center button pressed, we then if it's pressed, we can make a translation of our model or geometry, or anything which is defined here. If the scroll button is pressed, and if I click the right mouse button and I move the mouse, I can rotate. Check always the triad, the triad system, the X, Y, and Z axis. If we click in the sphere, in the central sphere, it will fit our geometry or entities. If we click each of the axis, it will orient our view with respect to that axis, okay. And so just to know how to operate with CivilFEM. It will help us a lot if we use parameters. How to use parameters in CivilFEM? First, we activate the parameter list. Okay, it can be, well, you can see it here. We can move it to any place. I consider it very well okay to leave it here. So we can switch from output to parameter list, and here I can add different parameters to be used in my model. For example, you can set a parameter which can be a length. Any parameter can be a type, a real number, integral number, or even an array, a 2D point or 2D vector, and we can set the units. In this case, I want to set a length, or if we want to leave it with no dimension, there's a dimensionless type. In this case, we want to use it as a length, and it can be one value, and always can be any. We can set the units as well. How can we use a parameter here? So we can use it here in the definition of one distance. Instead of setting the distance by entering the number, we can enter the length here. So if it's updated here, okay, it will be updated automatically in the model. And as well, we can always important thing, I will always remind you that we can use any, even if we change the unit here, the ones that you have selected for this case the coordinates for this point will remain the same, but always can be non-consistent. That's very important. So we can use parameters for everything. Okay. Another important thing in the geometry is this button, this reference option. What can we do with if we click the reference option? That means that everything that will be defined, it will refer to a previous geometry. For instance, if we want to define a line, if you can see, it will ask us a previously defined points here. You can use the combo, just pulling down the corresponding point, setting a name. Okay, line 3, or just by clicking here the points can create. If we press Control here, okay, I can define. I will repeat the process. Line 4, clicking here, and now if I press caps button at the same time I click my last point, my point 3 for the line 4 definition, I will have defined another 2 lines. In this case, I have defined a line without existing points, and here I have defined line 3 and line 4 using the reference option, okay, with existing points, which are point 1, 2, and point 3. Just check that if I uncheck the reference option, then I will have another options for my point definition. Okay. Well, I didn't tell you that it's always very important to save our model. We can save as, for example, sample 0. We can use the save as button, yes, or click here, save, or use the Ctrl plus S keyboard shortcut. Okay, and it will be saved. Just check here in the output that it will be saved. If we want to create another type of geometry, which can be a volume, we can follow the same procedure. We have some already predefined primitives, which are cylinders, cones, spheres, or, or, or box volumes. By default, there are always some dimensions defined. Okay, or we can use any other the utilities as we have shown before, either the reference options or the grid. Okay, if I can activate the grid, we can create volumes as I shown with the other entities. But we can use Boolean operations. For example, if I want to, in this case, mm, make an extrusion of this, for example, this is geometry, and well, extrude it following a path. A path can be a line or an axis. My axis can be well, one point, one line from here to following the z direction. So I change this vector. I have it. Now I can make an extrusion following exactly this path, this length, or it will give select my axis, and then I click my surface. You just can follow these tips. If I want to modify something, I just go up, and instead, if I want to unselect or select another axis, I can select it here, and then go and select my surface. Okay. In this case, I want to select my axis, which will be this one. So I made an extrusion of this volume of this surface to get a volume. I can of course modify my axis if I want, just by changing this direction vector. And another way to create an extrusion, if I delete this volume, is to create instead of a path extrusion by a path, use the partial length. Partial length is the same procedure. Just select an axis, but in this case we will set the length, which is it's not necessary to have the same length as the axis. So here I can set 10 meters. Okay, here, and then select my surface and click OK. So here I have my volume. Okay. So another way of modifying my geometry is to, for example, uh, create a Boolean operation. I can, if I want to create, well, this beam to have to be voided, create an inner circle to be extracted, so we can have a hole in my volume. I can perform it. Well, yes, I want to explain you as well another tool for the HUD toolbar is the selection of entities. If all the entities are highlighted, that means that I can select. If I if I keep my control button pressed, I can create a selection of entities just by clicking, and it will be added to the selection. The selection can be just by picking or by just selecting from the entity model, and it will be the entities which are selected will be highlighted in blue color. Okay, if I just click in any place where there are no entities, everything will be unselected. So by default, all entities, point, curves, surfaces, and volumes are highlighted. If I just leave volumes, if I want to select something, only volumes will be can be selected, or only points. So if I click here, only points will be selected. And I want to show you the box selection. If I create a box selection just by with the mouse, I select by a square. If it's from right to left, if any entity is part of the entity is included in that box, the whole entity will be selected. For instance, these lines. If I select these lines and points, these three entities are selected. But if it's from left to right, the box selection, only the entities which are included full, if only the full entity is included in the box, it will be on the selection. So okay, I think many of the of other software use the same type of selection, box from left to right or right to left. I activate again my grid. I can operate with the view of my entities. By default, if I select any entity, in this case with volumes, will be better. It's I can be as totally solid and some translucency, just or just a grid view, or just completely hidden. Okay, I can change the color as well, or later we'll see with the structural elements. Once we have it with the mesh, we can work with another type of view as well. So it will be better if I make it translucent. If I want to create an inner circle, for example, I can create here a circle. I can set my center, for example, here. Okay, and set a radius. I can set it just here, or 0.1. We'll try. Normal vector which will be the z. I can set again a parameter. Will be better. Zero point 0.2, but I want it in meters. Okay, or I can set, maybe it's too big. Imagine this. I want to create, well, this surface tool. I can, well, to create a cylinder, I can just use the same procedure as before, or even I can set my center a little bit behind. Okay, so I can make properly my the hole in from a complete hole inside this beam. So if I want to create my, I can create a cylinder using the same. Okay, in this case I'm going to create just an extrusion. My cylinder with the same axis. My height, my length will be 12 meters. In this case my entity will be my circle. Okay, here I have it. And now what I want to do is to subtract this volume by this circle, by this cylinder. Okay, so now if I hide it, well, I will change my color. Here I have my new, if I hide my other entities which I don't need, here I have my, if I change the 0.8, you see that it's automatically updated. Yes, another way to create a cylinder will be just by creating a cylinder, taking the same center as the circle, the same axis, setting a radius and the height. Okay, it will be the same. Here I just created a circle and I had extruded it, but I can do the same with I can obtain the same volume with using another way of geometry definition. So well, I have my volume, my lines. So I have shown you some capabilities of my geometry definition. So I think another way of obtaining my geometry is well, I want to save it first, is if I create a new model, is to import it from an external CAD file. To do that, we go here, import geometry, and select my my file. It can be IGES files, step file, parasolid, or DXF. I have one file here. Important thing is just to if you must know the units that they have been used in in my imported file. So if the geometry definition is correctly done, once I import the file, I will have my volumes here. I can change its names, and this is the a file of the Rome Pantheon that we have done it in another with another geometry modeler, and it's another way to create geometry in CivilFEM just by importing it from another software. Okay.